So good morning formally to everybody. We had a great response to this session, and I want to thank you all for taking time in what I know for many of our operators is an extraordinarily busy few weeks as they try to make up for a significant amount of lost time and challenging circumstances. And today, as part of our ongoing supports to support and provide resources to the industry throughout the pandemic, we've been coordinating a series of webinars and providing mentoring and program supports over the last number of months. This has included informational webinars such as the one we're doing today. We are also offering one-on-one business mentoring and support services through our Tourism Reactivation for Industry program. And that program is being delivered with supports from Tourism Nova Scotia. I want to acknowledge them for that as well. But today we're going to be talking about federal supports, and it cannot go, I don't think, too heavily saying that we've had a significant amount of federal supports that have come forward over the past 18 months. But this particular program we're talking about today has probably been one of the most highly anticipated ones. So in Nova Scotia, the Tourism Relief Program Fund is being administered through ACOA. And we're joined today by Stephen Lane, who is the program lead for the Tourism Relief Fund in Nova Scotia. So thank you so much for joining us today, Stephen. Steve's going to walk us actually through the program eligibility for this particular fund, as well as the application process. And he's going to provide some insight into, some options around different types of initiatives that may be available for use through that fund for both operators as well as for destinations, because there's been some questions around who actually can use these funds and what types of activities should they be associated with. I also just want to reinforce that links to the Tourism Relief Fund information and application form are available on our Tourism Strong Hub, and encourage you to use that portal for some of the most current information. Outside of programs, there's a lot of other great resources and tools on there as well for you. And I want to reiterate that if you find today that the TRF is not the right program for you, Stephen and his team, and as well our team here at TIANS, are here to support and guide you and hopefully help navigate you to other resources and other tools that may be an appropriate support as you move forward and rebuild out of COVID. So I'm going to say thank you all for coming. Welcome to Stephen, and I'll hand over to you for a presentation.
All right, great. Share my screen. I assume everybody can see that. So, and I'll just jump right in. If you have any questions, we can put them in the chat, where we can do it midstream as we go along, or we can wait to the end. Doesn't really, I don't really have a preference if you don't. So we'll just keep the chat open, and we'll monitor that. And then if there's any questions, you can put it in there. And afterwards, we can do the raise hands, and we'll address any questions as we go along. So my name is Steve Lane. I'm a director with the SIG unit here in Sydney. I just took on that role here not that long ago, but before that, I spent 18 years as an account manager with ACOA in the Cape Breton office, and my main portfolio was tourism. So I do have lots of experience working with tourism operators, in particular in Cape Breton. I've worked probably with many, if not most, of all of the operators that have a presence with ACOA. So I do have lots of experience working with the operators and working with DMOs and not-for-profits when it comes to the tourism sector. So hopefully I can provide some insight of what this Tourism Relief Fund is, what it looks like, and kind of what the key kind of projects and programs that we're looking for when we're looking for applications, how to apply, who the contact information is, things like that. The Tourism Relief Fund was announced obviously in the last budget 2021, and I think I think some of the people said, well, maybe it should be called the Tourism Recovery Fund, because it's really mainly pushed more towards a recovery. So post-COVID, how to enhance our products to have them ready for when tourists return to our province. What can we do to attract them here? How can we enhance our experiences, enhance our products, things like that. So it's not so much as a relief fund as in, trying to recoup what we lost through COVID, but maybe better positioning ourselves to then attract guests and welcome back guests going forward. So you'll see that there's a bit more of aside from say the COVID type of response programs, this one isn't designed to help with the immediate needs of say liquidity. There is a liquidity component, but it really is designed to help operators launch themselves and grow and get ready for the upcoming season. So the Tourism Relief Fund was announced in budget 2021, and basically it's being delivered by the RDAs across the country. So CanNor in up north, the Western WD in Western FedNor for Ontario, SEDQ for Quebec, and ACOA for Atlantic Canada. So we are responsible for delivering the Tourism Relief Fund on behalf of the federal government. And we have kind of put together some parameters that are basically national. The program is a national program, so the parameters are national, and they basically are run very similar across the country. There's not much difference between what our program looks like and what the other RDAs look like across the country. They were built together. We all came together and developed some common themes and priorities. So like I said, it's administered through ISED, which is the Innovation, Science and Economic Development Canada, and we support tourism business and organizations to adapt their operations to meet public health requirements while investing in products and services to facilitate their future growth. And that's really, like, I know to meet public health requirements is listed there, and it's important, but the real thrust of this program, I think, in my opinion, is the investing in products and services to facilitate the future growth. And that's kind of where our focus is. We definitely want to make sure the health requirements are being adhered to and providing opportunities for operators to invest in those. So if there's ever a future COVID, I hope not, but if there is, then we'll be prepared to undertake that. But really it's to facilitate what does your product look like in the future, and how can we then better service the needs of our guests. And I'll go into obviously more detail in what those projects might look like. The overall budget is about $500 million over 2 years, with $50 million or 10% specifically dedicated to Indigenous tourism initiatives. And then there's a $15 million that was carved off for national initiatives. So, essentially when you break it all down between, all the different RDAs and population, things like that, ACOA has essentially somewhere around that $14 million range for tourism relief efforts in Nova Scotia. The Tourism Relief Fund will position Canada as a destination and Nova Scotia a destination of choice for domestic and international travel is safe once again. And that's kind of a unique kind of approach with this Tourism Relief Fund is on the domestic kind of markets. Traditionally, if we did any marketing or we support any marketing type of related costs, it was always done trying to attract that international kind of guest and things like that. But this one actually is really does help on bringing domestic markets into your product or into your service. And there's opportunities to do that where in the past that was quite limited. So there is definitely a more robust, more expanded kind of priorities when it comes to say what we would traditionally do under some tourism programs that ACOA has. And it's really helping the sector reposition itself to welcome international visitors, but providing the best Canadian tourism experience. So that's what the guiding light is, what does ACOA want to see in a project? And I'll get into some more specifics. Is we really want to see an increase in quality, not just for general repairs and maintenance, but an increase in quality of a product or an experience. Like what kind of good experience can we provide to attract people to come here? So that's kind of what the main thrust is, and we're looking for increased yield. So we try to line up our projects with the priorities of what we think are good tourism projects, which increases yield. So try to get more dollar out of a customer by having enhanced experiences or products, expanding the shoulder season. So if we can provide some products that allow operators to stay open later or open earlier in the season, or moving towards a 12-month operations, that's also kind of a high priority. and digitization or digitalization, basically investing in the business to adapt digital technologies as well is also a priority, so that you can better interact with customers and provide better services. As I mentioned, we have a 10% kind of target nationally, and ACOA has committed to making sure that we hit our 10% target to help meet that 10% national target of Indigenous Tourism Act initiatives. So that could be Indigenous-led initiatives, Indigenous-owned initiatives, or tourism that focuses on Indigenous type of activities. So we think that's obviously a quite an important goal to get to. But I think we also have some robust and unique opportunities within our Indigenous communities in Nova Scotia that getting to that 10% shouldn't be too much of an issue. I think we have lots of product there that we can work with. So there's also a $15 million kind of carve out that was done nationally to help with the federal tourism growth strategy. So destination development, seasonal geographic dispersion, human resources, and skills development. So that piece was cut off the top, and that is being delivered through ISED. And we don't really have the details on that, to be honest, but those will be able to delivering that directly. This funding provides the opportunity to leverage the reach and expertise of national tourism organizations trying to do that pan-Canadian or multi-regional activities, and then addressing some of the challenges the tourism sector is facing. And definitely human resources is one that we're seeing a critical type of challenge, but also things such as conference events, training and research, and strengthening networks, things like that. So that's where the breakdown is. Most of it, as you can see, the vast majority of it is going to end up in the hands of operators across the country. So eligible applicants. So that this is kind of what we're going to be keying in on these next two slides of eligible applicants and eligible projects. So eligible applicants obviously are businesses. We're looking for incorporated businesses there. When it says businesses, we had some sole proprietorships that we would traditionally do projects with in the past. However, when this project was put together, this program was put together, I don't know if it was kind of an oversight or if it was just done intentionally, where it does restrict our applicants to registered businesses, not incorporated, but registered businesses, not sole proprietors. Not-for-profit organizations such as tourism associations, but also could be, festivals and things like that. And I'll touch on festivals in a minute. But so our not-for-profits obviously are eligible, and then band councils or other Indigenous organizations and cooperatives are also eligible under the Tourism Relief Fund. So to be eligible under the Tourism Relief Fund, and this is important, must meet at least one of the following criteria. So it has to be a key supplier or operator in the visitor experience, be part of a defined tourism cluster or tourism dependent community, including supporting downtown cores, provide an anchor product or service in a tourism destination. That sounds like it's restrictive in nature, but it really does provide lots of opportunity of us to work. And I think, by the nature of that definition, you can see that maybe the priorities are in rural Nova Scotia versus the cities, which is probably tends to lean that way. And I think that's where we'll see the majority of our projects will come through, say, rural type of Nova Scotia projects, because those communities are a lot more dependent on tourism. So if we look at the communities around Nova Scotia that are dependent on tourism revenue to help drive their economy, those are the communities we want to be part of. A key supplier or operator in the visitor experience, like, that doesn't mean you have to be like that third category, the anchor. Like, you don't have to be that, but you have to be able to provide a service that we're trying to build capacities within the communities so that they can you know, if somebody is visiting a certain community, not only do they have some places to stay, they have places to eat, they have activities to do, things like that. So if you're contributing to that overall experience in that community where you have a service to offer a tourist, or accommodations to offer and things like that, then those are kind of that's kind of what we're hoping to see in our applications. And then provide an anchor product or service in a tourism destination. So those are our anchor products. Those are some of our, we'll say, drivers of tourism. So people are actually coming to the province or coming to a location to visit that one property as their main goal or service. And then obviously once they're there, taking in the other services that are available. So those are our eligible applicants. Those are what we'll be looking for. As soon as an application comes in, we'll be making sure they meet those two criteria, just as the first blush of, does this line up with the Tourism Relief Fund? So our eligible activities under the Tourism Relief Fund. So really there's two main thrusts for the Tourism Relief Fund. And so product development is the big one. I kind of alluded to that a couple times already. And that's kind of where I think we'll see this is where we'd hope to see most of our applications come from. This is where we'll be really focusing our efforts to help the tourism operators. And that's to enhance tourism experiences, you know, help tourism as a business to adapt to the new normal, to modernize their offerings and encourage the adoption of more environmentally and sustainable and inclusive practices. So those would be our traditional kind of upgrade properties. So whether that's whether you're providing tours, experiences, whether you're an accommodations provider, it's to upgrade those experiences and accommodations so that post-COVID, which we hope will be next tourism season, that you can welcome guests with an enhanced product that will obviously lead to increased revenue, but also increased satisfaction on the guest side. So those will be your capital. Most of those projects are going to be capital in nature. So you're going to reinvest in, whether that's, you know, if it's accommodations, whether that's upgrading, you know, all the linens and beds and, you know, putting new floorings in and bathrooms in and things like that. So mainly capital in nature. You know, if it's experiences, maybe it's, you know, expanding your offerings or adding to them so that you can provide, you know, social distancing properly in the future if needed to be. Whether that's, you know, investing in some environmentally and sustainable type of green projects to help with power or ways to reduce waste, things like that. So that one there, we'll see most of our most of the applications I think will be in this direction. So there'll be capital in nature, there'll be investments, and they'll be looking for help, obviously. Destination development is the second kind of focus that we're working on. And those position communities to take advantage of post-pandemic opportunities through strategic planning for medium and long-term investments, as well as supporting destination development prospects in line with the objectives set up in the federal tourism growth strategy. So that one there is more mainly geared towards the not-for-profits and the DMOs, is developing those plans or trying to implement plans that really attract guests to that area, not particularly to a particular property or a particular experience, but to a certain area. So those ones there, that destination development, that'll be the main thrust that we'll be using for our not-for-profits and DMOs. And the only thing I will caution on this one here is festival events, because we're seeing, you know, this program has been live for a while now, so I can give you some experiences of what we're seeing and kind of how things are playing out. And when it comes to festival events, Canadian Heritage has a program that specifically is designed to help with festival events. So we will be referring most of the festival event applications to Canadian Heritage, even though it does kind of fit under that destination development and they are kind of priorities. If for some reason the project or festival event isn't approved under Canadian Heritage, we will revisit it and take a look at it and see if there's some funds available under this program, because we know those are important. We just have a different federal envelope for that, and then we'll be referring people to Canadian heritage when it comes to festival events in particular. So, recognizing the local realities, the RDAs will work with to address the needs of business communities on a regional basis. Offering consistent kind of support across Canada. That's what I said. This program was developed at a national level. ACOA was part of those national conversations. The program is, with some very minor kind of changes between regions, is quite similar, like almost identical right across the country. If there's an issue in one part of the country, they still meet on a regular basis to discuss it, nationally, how that should be approached and things like that. So that's what we're doing here. We think we developed a strong program that helps businesses, and I think this program would definitely fit that. Liquidity funding may be available on exceptional case-by-case to help tourism entities, including deeply impacted tourism business that remain dormant during the pandemic, or that could not diversify their offerings for domestic tourism. So we already had a triple RF, which was the Regional Recovery Fund, and we did provide many tourism operators with liquidity through that fund, and so most of this is not, as I mentioned, it's not really a COVID kind of protocol type of program, but we do understand there's probably still a few operators out there across the province that either didn't get triple RF or that wasn't quite enough, and they're still needing some liquidity investments. So we do still have some components for that. Now, while it's not on the slide, the breakdown. I'll just give me one sec there. Yeah. So liquidity isn't up here on the slide, so I'm just going to continue talking about that since I was on that topic. But liquidity, we can do 100% up to a maximum of $100,000 based on the needs of the companies, and that's for profit only under the Storage Relief Fund. But like I said, those are going to be more on an exceptional basis, kind of that don't fit anything else in a case by case. We'll look at that. When we go back to the other programs, so the destination development and then the enhancement programs, we have two different options that we can offer our tourism operators. So we can provide non-repayable contributions up to $100,000 for 50% of the eligible costs. So, typically that would end up being a $200,000 project. We would provide a $100,000 non-repayable contribution, and then the operator would provide the remaining $100,000. They would finance that. So that's quite unique. And like I said, I've been doing this for 18 years, and in tourism probably for just as long. And we've never really been able to provide non-repayable assistance to really many operators, let alone tourism operators. So we expect we'll see some significant uptake on that part alone, just the non-repayable. When it says up to 100,000, that's up to 100,000. You don't have to put in a $200,000 project. You can put in a smaller project for that. We will kind of caution that it's not a general repairs and maintenance type of program. So if you do have a water line to fix, or if you have some painting that needs to be done or things like that, then this is probably not going to be the right fit. But if you're fixing a water line and you're painting and you're putting new roofs on and you're fixing up a bathroom, or if you're providing new experiences and you're adding different things, but you're also repairing some things at the same time, well, then that might be a bit of a different scope, right? So we'll work with you to figure out exactly the best fit. The second option for commercial operators is to take a fully repayable contribution of up to $500,000, but at that point we can do 75% of the cost. So on $500,000, that's about $670,000 project. Where we could do 500, you'd have to raise the operator would have to raise the other 175,000 or whatever. So that's also available, but given our budgets, given the budgets that we have, which is significant, we'll be focusing a lot on the non-repayable projects, and the repayable projects will limit to, I won't say limit, but we'll expect to see less of the fully repayable projects and more of the non-repayable projects, just so we can have a bigger impact across the sector and across the province. An important note underneath that is a business cannot receive a combination of non-repayable and repayable contributions for the same project. And when I say for the same project, it's most likely they just can't receive it at all, because we really don't want to get into project splitting and figuring out phase one or phase two when it comes to this program, things like that. So I would suggest, or I'm going to encourage, that once you have a chance to scope out your project and what your priorities are, is that you apply under one stream or the other, because it's unlikely that we'll be able to work on both components for you. So keep that in mind when you're developing a project. That's the kind of how we're going to approach it, and that's consistent across the country as well. Not-for-profit organizations and Indigenous entities that are not generating profits will be eligible for the non-repayable contributions. So that's the same thing. But we can do up to 75% funding when it comes to the not-for-profit organizations and Indigenous entities. I don't know why that's not there, but we can do up to 75%. Project contributions would not exceed 500,000. So that's when I say that fully repayable contribution, that's really anything over 100,000. But our max under the Tourism Relief Fund will be $500,000 in contribution from ACOA. So that's could be total project cost of 675,000, something like that. So I'm just going to, it says here to contact your RDA. So I'm just going to pop up one last screen to kind of show you. One sec there, sorry. Share this screen now. So there's the contact information based on regions, and we can provide this and have it sent out to people if they need it. But it breaks it down by community, essentially, except for Cape Breton. Cape Breton is done. Usually we have 3 account managers there, but we're down to 2 at the moment. So Glenn McDonald, Lauren Krashevda will take care of any projects in Cape Breton. I'm acting director for SIG in Cape Breton, but I'll be also manager of the overall Tourism Relief Fund. So you can contact me directly if you have any general questions, and I can help you point you into the right direction of who you should be talking to. Mark Vanderweal does Pictou, Antigonish, and Guysborough. So if you have a project in those areas, Mark will be your first contact. Andrea Jackson does East Hants and Colchester counties. So Andrea will be your contact. Michelle Scott is in Cumberland. Melissa Quinn does West Hants and Kings. Brianne Lombard does Digby and Annapolis. Mike Camo is Yarmouth, but he also does our service to official languages communities. So if there's a community that is looking for official language, Mike Camo would be your contact. Mark Townsend does Shelburne and Queens, and Rachel Brown does Lunenburg and rural Halifax, and Paul Joran does Halifax and Halifax East. And then the managers for both of those regions are down below there. So those are your main contacts for the program as well. So that in general is a overall kind of generic kind of approach to us. So I'm sure there's lots of questions. So we'll start asking any questions now, and I'll do my best to answer.
Super, thank you so much. So there's been a couple of questions come up as we've gone through the process, which is great. So one of the first ones that actually came up was really around the the component of adding infrastructure, using this fund as a way to build your operation to diversify and add experience. So there's an operator of an accommodation that is interested in potentially adding, looking at adding a cafe to their inn. Is this something that would fall under potentially that potential, obviously, fund? And would it be something then it would have to demonstrate, obviously, that it would build capacity, that it would add quality to the experience and sort of support the more of a creation of a destination for a community?
So that's, restaurants are always difficult for us to work with just because of competitive impact, right? So in that case there, we'd want to have the discussion a little bit further on, does the cafe service the guests only and kind of what that experience is, or does it service, a larger kind of clientele? And if it does, what's the capacity in that community, then what the impact would be by adding a new cafe and things like that. So that one's a good starting off with one that's a little bit more difficult to answer than most, I would say. But yeah, so we could work on that. We just got to make sure that we understand the project and what the impacts would be. But in general, those tourism operators, infrastructure type costs, the enhancements and things like that would be eligible. The two things we want to make sure of, if you're adding, say, a significant amount of rooms, so say if you were adding 15, 20 or 30 rooms or something like that, what the competitive impact would be to the remaining operators in that area. But if it's a minor, if it's 1, 2 or 3 or 4 rooms, well then the impact is going to be pretty marginal. So we're probably in good shape to work on those projects without much issues.
Okay.
So that one there would all depend on what the the purpose of the cafe is and who will be servicing before we could get into whether that is. Yeah.
So picking up on that, if there's an operator that's looking at an operator, I'm going to use a bed and breakfast as an example here. One of the questions that's come forward from our B&B says, I'm registered with the government, I'm registered with TARA. From an eligibility perspective, what about sole proprietors and so on? There's no restrictions and no pieces around that, or can you just speak to that for a moment?
Yeah, so sole proprietors, that's an area that nationally it was decided that we would work outside of sole proprietors. So it'd have to be an incorporated business to be eligible under this program.
Okay.
Yeah.
So for some of those smaller businesses, and again, I'll use a B&B or some of our smaller accommodation providers, a number of them have identified, for example, that they would like to improve their accommodation offering, as an example, by doing something like adding or adjusting the way their infrastructure works to have a private bath for each of their bedrooms instead of shared bathrooms. And this is in keeping with the shifting market, as well as recognizing the importance from a safety and sanitation perspective moving forward. Would that be something that could be taken into account under another program, or where could an operator go to have discussion around that?
Yeah, so on the B&B side, it's a little bit more difficult to say more than say your smaller inns or something like that, right? The smaller inns, then yes, we could actually look at looking at renovating to have private baths, things like that. That would be no issues there. When it comes to other programs, depends on the project size. So we definitely have partners, say, with the local CBDCs and with BDC. We have MOU with BDC on projects that we can't really work with. So those would be our two kind of main kind of partners that we work on projects a lot and refer programs back and forth when it comes to, say, projects that we may not be able to participate with. So yeah, I would still encourage anybody, if they have those types of questions, to still reach out to an account manager, because aside from just providing our own funding, one of the things we've been tasked with for the last several years is pathfinding, right? Saying, okay, we might not be able to help you out, but let's see if we can find other programs that can help you out. So most of them are quite experienced in pathfinding and providing with the contacts in your area for those businesses or those organizations that may actually be able to play a role.
Oh, that's great. Thank you for clarifying that. Um, in terms of the matching funds, Stephen, does it matter, if an applicant comes forward and they're identifying that they can bring those 50% of the matching funds forward, does it matter what the source of those funds is? So we're being asked, could a business find other funding to cover the other 50%, or does it have to be actually put up by the business itself?
Yeah, no, no, it can be fun. It can be funded. It can be bank financing. It could be a loan of some sort. It could be equipment financing. All those things are eligible. If you're offering experiences on the water and you're going through the Fishery Loans Board, that's eligible. Like that, we could you work with them. So yeah, so the easy answer is it can be funded through any other program. The reality is we do definitely work with the business plan. You don't need to submit a business plan that shows that the organization can support that additional debt. So that's really the only, I won't say that's a caveat, but that's something we need to consider is make sure that we didn't get too highly leveraged with debt when going ahead with this project. But yeah, for all purposes with respect to this program, it can be any type of financing except for in-kind costs. That's the only thing we don't allow as eligible costs or eligible financing. But as with respect to bank financing or term debt or operating lines or whatever you're using, then those should be completely fine.
Okay. I have identified for one of our B&Bs that's on the line has asked for just sort of identifying again. It's been a hard category in terms of finding specific types of supports that they can be eligible for. So I'm just saying that one of your team members, if you could, I'll give you the contact person, and if you could reach out to them afterwards or have your staff member reach out, that would be great.
That's fantastic. Yeah, I appreciate that because I think
Perfect.
those conversations need to be had, and
Yeah.
we're glad to have them. And I think that's the best way to do it. So yeah, by
Awesome.
all means, send that along.
One of our attendees is saying, how is there a way to decide, or do you just work through your local advisor to decide which of the contribution categories is the right fit for you? I mean, there may be some operators out there who are kind of torn between which one would be the most appropriate opportunity for them to be getting involved in.
Yeah, no, definitely. That's exactly what we would hope that would happen is that you'd reach out to the area account manager from ACOA, have those conversations, go over the project scope, talk about the pros and cons of both processes, and they'll be able to provide you with some insight on A, which one might be better, more appropriate, or B, like what kind of funds we have left in in say the bigger projects if we have the budgets available to do those types of projects. So they'll definitely be able to guide you that way and provide a sounding board and help you walk through your thought process and on scoping out your project. But I suspect we will see a lot of those conversations before applications are submitted, and we would encourage them as soon as you start putting together a small scope and you're starting to ask yourself those questions, then reach out to an account manager and say, this is the scope I'm looking at or I'm working for, and they can definitely provide some insight on how to scope that properly.
Perfect. So Stephen, to that end, then maybe what we could do is get just we're going to have the whole presentation, I know, but just that one slide in particular that had all the
Yes.
contact details on it. If you would send that through to us, then we can get that loaded up on Tourism Strong, and somebody like Tim Doucette, who from Deep Sky Eye, who had reached out with that question, how do you decide your contribution category? Then people can reach out directly to their local advisors and make sure that their account reps are aware of kind of where they're looking.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
And Jonathan, I see you've asked that as well. So absolutely, we will get you your local rep. We will send you that contact information. There's a question here from Stephanie Miller-Vincent, who's down on the South Shore, and she's saying, could you please review again the nonprofit eligibility component? So the thing that she's saying is, my understanding is that it's 100% funded. So what is the maximum amount for nonprofit association funding?
Yeah, so yes, I think I may have said 75%, but I think we can do up to 100% for the DMOs and the not-for-profits. Each project's capped out at 500,000, but I would suspect we won't see too many of projects at 500,000. While this is, I will say this is, a strong kind of for-profit program, right? This is what it was designed for. And not to say that the not-for-profit part of this program isn't important. It is very important, and we definitely are going to be seeing lots of projects in that area. But we're really focusing on we're definitely focusing on commercial operators, and then how do our not-for-profit operators support our commercial operators. So really looking for that tie. So yeah, we can definitely do that. But I would say we're probably still looking at, say, smaller individual projects versus, say, multiple $500,000 projects when it comes to the not-for-profit type of program. Yep.
Sort of diversify and spread it across a little bit.
Yep.
Roland's indicated in the question and answer here in the chat, we're looking to add air conditioning to our cottages. This would definitely increase and add to the customer experience. Would we be eligible for funding for this kind of a project?
Yeah, like air conditioning themselves, I think, that's a bit more of a repair maintenance thing. So to me, that would be one of the things, if you could package that with something, and this is just from my experience. So if you could package that with some more enhancements, right? So a bit more comprehensive than just one piece. And that's what we're looking for, is more of that comprehensive project that adds air conditioning, but also replaces something else or enhances the property, the grounds, or adds gazebos or outlooks, hiking trail on site. So
or maybe it's time to replace windows, and that would also improve your environmental sustainability because you're becoming more energy efficient,
exactly,
right?
or
Like
heating systems and stuff. Yeah, so just a little bit more, but I'm glad that question was asked, because we get that question very similar or something very close to that. So it would be similar, like, well, I have to replace the roofs on my cottages. Well, replacing the roofs doesn't really enhance the product. Air conditioning does enhance the product a bit more, but if it's more part of more of a comprehensive plan where you're doing the roofs, but you're also, like you said, adding new windows or changing the bedding or putting on trails or providing an experience on site, like whether it's campfires or bonfires and things like that, well, then we're starting to move into, say, more of a comprehensive upgrade, which I think is a bit more of a better fit than just a one-off type of fix, right? So that's what I would encourage when you're looking at projects like that. Go through your property, see if there's other things you can do to really enhance and build a bit more of a comprehensive kind of plan versus just focusing on one aspect.
Okay. One quick note I'm getting here says the phone number on the chart for Mark Vanderweal is incorrect. I'm getting a message that says the number is no longer in service when I dial that. So maybe we'll just double check that before we distribute that out. Would be great. And we will do that.
What was that question?
They said the phone number that's provided for Mark Vanderweal is incorrect. The person is dialing this number and they're getting that number is no longer in service message. So we'll clarify that with you, Steve, and get that updated before we distribute any of those contact details.
That's funny. I took out all those numbers except for Mark's by mistake. So that was an oversight on my part. So I will provide emails, but I wasn't sure if I knew all those emails were correct, but I didn't know the number. So I had removed them, but I missed Mark somehow. So
and people do actually pick up the phone and call people once in a while still.
Yeah, no, that's, but I find that this way here, you can at least reach out and say, let's arrange a time to discuss and things like that, right? So
absolutely.
Yeah.
I have a question from Patrick here. He's saying, assuming that you put an application in, it fits all the criteria, it's in the scope, all that kind of stuff. Two questions really. What is the turnaround time for typically for approval of a submission? And when costs are incurred, how are funds dispersed?
Awesome questions. Those are great questions. So let me just preface this with, right now we're in a federal election, right? So we are in a moratorium with respect to approving projects at this point. We just can't be seen as impacting a federal election. So at this point here, we can't approve any projects until at least September 20th, because that's obviously the day of the election. So that's not typical. So I'll say that with that preface, but I'll give you now what the normal what the normal procedures look like. So if you're applying, say, after September 20th, what it may look like. So couple key elements that impact time frame. One is what the construction looks like. If it's in interior construction to existing buildings, things like that, very quick. We can get those projects done and up and sent up to the minister's office and sent back relatively quickly. When I say relatively quickly, usually our regional offices will usually have it for a week to two before providing a recommendation. Then we send it up through a ministerial process, and then it comes down. So it's usually quick off our desk. If it's new buildings and new kind of construction that we may be required to do a duty consult or environmental assessment. None of those are at any cost to the operators, but it does sometimes it's very straightforward. We get an answer the same day. Sometimes that might take a couple of weeks before we get that answer that we don't need to do a duty to consult or the environmental assessment is completely fine. So that could add a little bit of time. So I would say roughly 6 weeks. Let's give, that's generally the time frame before when you submit an application and when you have an answer. Somewhere around there is pretty close to accurate. Under normal conditions, obviously with the election, we wouldn't get anything until at least until after September 20th. When it comes to payments, we do based on costs incurred. So we do kind of a more of a reimbursement model. So, let's just say, the first cost is for you bought a pallet of windows that you need to replace, and the total bill is $10,000. Well, you would get that invoice for $10,000, and if we're doing 50%, you would submit a claim. We would write you a check for $5,000. You could then use that $5,000 along with your own $5,000, and then pay the contractor or supplier. So that's how our processes work. Claims are usually turned around really very quickly. Like we have a very good claims process, that would probably turn your claims around, and we do direct deposits. So, those claims get by. Usually if you have a net 30-day kind of contract on larger kind of supplies, you can submit your claim, get your money, and still make it within that 30 without usually much issues. The first claim usually, I tell people the first claim is not the best experience because there's always pre-disbursement conditions in every contract, right? We got to verify that, you have the financing in place. We got to verify a few other things that you said that, that you were going to have in place. But once we verify those the first time, then the rest of the claims go by even quicker. So, and even that first one's not bad. It's just a little bit more cumbersome than the rest of them.
So I've got a couple of other questions here, but I did see one come in towards the bottom of this list that links into that, I think, and that would be, based on the application timeline that you just identified and approvals and so on, the question is, can applicants incur expenses before the date of their application? Like, where is the time frame in terms of existing work, potential work, etc.?
Yeah, so that's a very good question too, because this program is not like our other programs. So for traditional ACOA programs, any costs incurred have to be after the application date to be eligible. So after you submit an application, any costs after that would be eligible, depending on, obviously if you get approved. If you didn't get approved, then those costs are at your own risk. For this program here, we can backdate the costs that have been incurred to April 19th, which was the date of the budget. So this program here has that bit of a nuance that we don't normally have with a co-program. So if you have incurred some of those costs from April 19th on, then those costs can be considered eligible under the TRF.
I see a lot of, even though I can't visually see our participants, I'm anticipating a lot of half smiles going on with that. So that's great. So one of our operators that's on is actually saying, can this funding be used to do case studies or feasibility studies? Could we use it to hire a consultant to do a case study and determine if a non-service campground would be sustainable with tenting and pop-up trailers only?
I don't think so. Like I don't remember seeing anywhere in the literature where we could do studies or planning. So I will look into it a bit further. So you can definitely provide that person my information. I can follow up with them. I'm going to tend to say no. I don't think that's eligible. Like I know we did there's some studies money available for not-for-profits that are looking to say develop a plan for a different area on tourism and things like that. But that's more of a general kind of plan for a certain area or a certain community versus a very, like I say, a strategic business plan. But we do have what we call the consultant advisory service, which can help with projects like that. So while I don't think it fits under the Tourism Relief Fund, I think we can find a CAS or something similar that might be able to offset some of those costs and pay. I think that pays like 50% up to a maximum of $5,000 towards, say, strategic business planning or, some of those types of cost benefit analysis, or whether it's feasible or not, feasibility studies. So So whether, I don't think tourism relief fund might not fit, but we may have other options that could fit.
Okay, good, great. So we talked a little bit about environmental improvements and contributing to energy efficiency, that sort of thing, some of this work along here. If an operator was interested in installing solar panels and also as part of that, adjusting some of their cottages to be more accessible from an accessibility perspective, those would be two projects that could have some appeal under this fund.
Yeah, I would say that would be a pretty straightforward. That would be a pretty straightforward project. Like, it hits mainly the areas it looks like would have definitely some enhancement qualities, and then obviously some green energy or energy efficiency type of aspects. So, yeah, we could look at something like that.
Perfect. That's great. Wonderful. Well, that actually is I think I've covered all of the core questions that had come up in the chat and in the Q&A as we've gone through this process. There's a ton of great information that's actually been covered here. And as always, though, I will say that a lot of the sort of inspiration and sort of potential for some of this discussion often comes from the discussion at the end. So some of these questions, some of this conversation that's come up as we've gone through this process. So, so I think just before we wrap up, I just want to say, Stephen, is there anything else from your end that you wanted to identify to the participants, or you know, if you were going to say to them their call to action leading out of today, what would it be?
Yeah, definitely the call to action is to get in contact with the area account managers. Like that by far is the most important next step you can do, right? Because not only they know the program very well, but they also can help you kind of help scope out your project. It can save you a ton of time and energy when you're actually going in and doing that, versus, you know, if you try to scope it out all yourself and then bring it to us and then we say, well, this aspect's not really that important or doesn't quite fit, and this aspect does, can you work on that? If you do all that work up front, then the chances of it lining up with the tourism relief fund program are quite high, right? And then you've also built that relationship with the account manager. They know what you're working on, they know what you're doing, they know your product, they know your property, they know what experiences you're trying to develop. So so yeah, that would definitely be my next step, is once give it some thought on what projects you're thinking about or contemplating, and then once you start formulating that a bit in your head, then reach out to an account manager and say, here's my thoughts, and see where the next steps will be, and kind of what the best stream will fit, what activities will fit, all those things.
Perfect. I think this has been so informative. And again, there's been so many great ideas, lots of great information shared here. So just from our perspective, from the complete team at TIANS, want to say thank you so much to ACOA collectively, because you guys have just been such a great partner, always pre-pandemic, but in particular, really stepping up and being of great support to so many operators and destination groups across the province over this past 18 months. So thank you for that. Thank you for sharing your time with us today and your expertise. And I'm going to encourage everybody to make sure they get on Tourism Strong, make sure you're using that as your core support. And also just a reminder, you know, we're coming up to the end of August. There's a few key programs for support, other supports that are going to be ending for applications in the next few days. One of them that was just reminded to me was the accommodations tax rebate program. I'm not going to get the name of it right, as I never do. I'm going to scroll back up so I make sure I get it right. Jennifer McKean was encouraging us to remind people the provincial tourist accommodations real property tax rebate program. If you've not applied for it and you're eligible, applications for that end on the 31st, as do applications for the seasonal business tax designation program through property valuation services. So please check out those programs, particularly on that tax front. Again, on the seasonal one, you could be saving 25% on your commercial tax bill, which is significant for many of you, I know. We will be following up with those of you that attended today and have asked for connection to some of the team members that Stephen's working with for this program. And don't hesitate to reach out to the TIANS staff here. The office is open. Our organization is here to serve you with the industry, and we really appreciate you taking time today to join us. So thank you again to Steve. Thank you to all of you that joined. Have a great rest of your day. Stay strong.
Thanks, everyone.